when I was 6 years old, I loved climbing things. I'd also get very excited building dams out of mud, and I could also spend hours contemplating odd concepts from physics like why will a box not fly if I'm standing in the middle of the box and I lift really hard on both sides? Now, if you could grant that 6-year-old me any wish, you might expect for me to perhaps wish for something like a Game Boy, Lego, endless chocolate, things that I actually wanted. Yet, when I had my 7th birthday and I made that first cut into my birthday cake and I was allowed to wish for any single item in my head without anybody else in the world even knowing what I was wished for, the thing I wished for was a pony. It's something I had no desire for in the slightest. And why did I wish for a pony? Well, because my big sister told me I had to. She said I must wish for a pony because mum and dad wouldn't give her one. And she'd also tell her friends that I'm cool, otherwise if I didn't, she'd tell them I'm a loser. And that is the incredible power of social pressure and our innate desire to please others. So today I wanted to explore the concept of social pressure a bit further whilst also having a little bit of fun. A great way to teach something is to practice it, and I always want to help you, the listener, to think more scientifically and use psychology in practical ways in your life. We've all felt moments of social pressure after all, but also, could we double stack lessons in this episode on social pressure by learning how to think like a psychologist, just for fun? So the question I'm asking through this episode is, what would happen if we talked about social pressure as if it was a personality disorder? How would we classify and diagnose it? What would case studies look like? What could we do about social pressure personality disorder? And what other contributing factors could be at play, such as crossover with other personality disorders? So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, Sam Webster Harris, and stay tuned for a fun episode that should help you become less prone to social pressure problems and to also think like a psychologist. As social pressure isn't a scientific term, we should attempt to first classify it more standardly. If you've read the entire 3-Body Problem series, which is amazing, by the way, even if you didn't like the TV series, not the main topic of this episode, but I did kind of enjoy it, but I was also very underwhelmed compared to the books. Anyway, in the third and final book of the series, in an age 300 years in the future, the humans of that time refer to the humans of our current era as being very prone to social pressure personality disorder. So to treat social pressure as a personality disorder, it needs to be written in the DSM-5. That is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, published by the American Psychiatric Association. And you can think of it as the Bible or reference manual for therapists for classifying patients. So to start with, I thought we should write up an entry in the DSM-5 to be able to classify social pressure as a personality disorder with diagnostic criteria and treatment guidelines. So hypothetical entry, here we go, social pressure personality disorder, or SPPD, diagnostic criteria. To be diagnosed with social pressure personality disorder, a patient must exhibit at least 5 of the following 10 symptoms over a period of 6 months across various contexts. Symptom 1, excessive concern with others' opinions. Patients demonstrate an abnormal preoccupation with the opinions or expectations and approval of others, to the extent that it significantly impairs decision-making and self-esteem. Symptom 2, avoidance of social confrontation. Goes to excessive lengths to avoid conflicts and confrontations, often at the expense of personal needs or integrity. Symptom 3, dependency on external validation. Shows an excessive reliance on external validation rather than self-validation in personal value and decision-making processes. An interesting one. I'm sure you know people who really struggle to make a decision without the validation of someone else. Number 4, adaptability to social influence. Rapidly and frequently changing opinions, preferences, and behaviors to align with perceived social norms or the influence of others. Sounds like every single teenager. Anyway, number 5, social withdrawal. May withdraw from social interactions to avoid situations where judgment or evaluation is feared, despite a strong desire for social acceptance. Number 6, fear of rejection. Exhibits an intense fear of being rejected or socially excluded, which significantly affects personal, social, and professional relationships. I know many people that suffer from fear of rejection, but the importance here is the intensity of it and how much it then affects you. Anyway, number 7, impaired self-identity. Patient displays uncertainty about their own self-identity, their values and beliefs due to a predominant reliance on external definitions rather than personal conviction. This is something I do see a lot of people who really don't know who they should be without trying to define it around what others expect them to be. Number 8, heightened emotional sensitivity. They have an increased sensitivity to criticism or disapproval, leading to a significant emotional distress, anxiety, or depression. Number 9, performance anxiety. Experiences intense anxiety during social performances or activities, fearing negative evaluation or failure to meet others' expectations. Well, I certainly related to that when I was younger. And number 10, manipulative behavior. Engages in manipulative behaviors as a means to secure social acceptance or avoid negative evaluations from others. Again, sounds like many teenagers I know. Moving on to the diagnostic guidelines, which the DSM-5 always comes with to really help you work out the nuances of actually diagnosing someone versus someone just showing some of the symptoms. So, a diagnosis should be made with caution, distinguishing this disorder from generalized social anxiety disorder, for example, where the fear is specifically about social interactions rather than driven by the pressure to conform to social expectations. An individual's behavior patterns must be pervasive and not attributable to the psychological effects of a substance or another medical condition. This is because it's very easy to make associations and conclusions based on behaviors that are actually due to drugs or just something going on in their environment that wouldn't be part of their normal behavioral reactions. Finally, the disturbance must cause significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. We could also give guidelines on treatment, such as the types of therapy that would be the most beneficial for them, perhaps recommended drugs to help with symptoms of anxiety or depression, and things like whether group therapy would also be beneficial or when done in a supportive manner. And then prognosis. How much can we expect an intervention to be able to change someone with this disorder to help them learn and establish healthier patterns of thinking and behavior? And I think for social pressure personality disorder, a long-term treatment plan might be necessary, but it could really help them maintain gains and manage their symptoms. Now that we've finished the DSM-5 entry, I would just like to re-emphasize that description was purely hypothetical. It's meant to fit within the style and format typical of a DSM-5 entry. Social personality disorder, or SPPD, is not a real disorder. Do not go running to your therapist about your latest personality disorder, please. What is interesting is the amount of people who will self-diagnose themselves with a disorder they don't have after hearing some generic sounding traits. Like virtually anyone can diagnose themselves with ADHD if they watch a few TikToks about the traits of ADHD. And I'm sure anyone could have listened to those traits of social personality disorder and at least identified with quite a few of them, maybe even the 5 required to then get a diagnosis. But now that we've had a hypothetical scientific overview of the actual traits of SPPD, we should of course look at some case studies before we go misdiagnosing ourselves or others. And the reason we should do this is that all personality disorders are commonly misunderstood, as I was just saying. We overgeneralize things in popular culture, certainly disorders like narcissistic personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, or even anxiety or depression. These are really big and deep things going on and affecting people right in front of us who we'd never even notice have this problem. And yet someone else might have like one trait or one symptom and we'll in our heads diagnose them straight away as being a narcissist when they really don't have that disorder. So case studies are a great way to help emphasize and understand the realities of someone's experience beyond just the diagnostic traits. And we'll also find that disorders manifest themselves very differently from the same underlying disorder. So here I'm going to give us 2 case studies of very different life stories of people with hypothetical social personality disorder to demonstrate how the same disorder, the same diagnostic criteria, can lead to very different lives and very different sets of decision-making and outward appearances. So firstly, we have Elena. She is a fictional composite character who is a 27-year-old woman whose life has been shaped by her pervasive need for approval and fear of rejection. typical symptoms of social pressure personality disorder. She works in a mid-sized marketing firm, a job she chose not because of her interests, but because her parents believed it offered a stable career path and it was well regarded by their social circle. In terms of early signs and development, from a young age, Elena displayed an acute sensitivity to the reactions and opinions of others. She chose her college major in business primarily to please her parents and align with her peers' choices, despite having a genuine interest in art. Her fear of disappointing those around her led her to abandon her dream of becoming a painter. When it comes to social interactions and relationships, Elena's decisions have been heavily influenced by her peers. She often changes her stance on various issues from political opinions to personal preferences to match those of her company at the moment. This chameleon-like adaptability makes it difficult for her to form genuine connections and leaves her feeling isolated and hollow, despite being frequently surrounded by many friends. In her career and day-to-day life, Elena is known for her agreeableness. She never challenges her superiors or proposes innovative ideas, fearing that standing out might lead to criticism or rejection. This behavior has really stunted her career growth, trapping her in middle management where she feels safe yet unfulfilled. And if we look at the impact of SPPD on her decision-making, Elena's romantic life also mirrors all these characteristics of SPPD. She has stayed in a long-term relationship with a partner who is rather emotionally distant because her friends consider him a good match. Breaking up with him would mean facing the questions of her friends and some possible disapproval. Her choices from where to dine to what to wear are dictated by an overarching fear of judgment rather than her own desires. And you can see here we're really getting an impression of a person who doesn't know who they are, doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have a direction, and is on course for a forgettable life. So, therapy and interventions. Eventually, the cumulative stress of living a life that isn't her own leads Elena to seek therapy. She was initially resistant with her therapist, siding with the rest of the social pressure from everyone else versus her therapist, but she does eventually start to open up about her lack of self-direction and overwhelming fear of social reprisal. Though, through cognitive behavioral therapy, Elena begins to work on building an internal value system, which reduces her dependency on external validation. Group therapy sessions help her realize that she is not alone and that others do struggle with similar issues. Whilst her progress is slow, Elena does start setting small personal goals that align more closely with her real true interests, such as taking some evening art classes. She starts to learn to tolerate discomfort of not always fitting in or meeting others' expectations, and can even get some pleasure of choosing her own desires over pleasing others. Although she still struggles with the urge to conform, therapy has helped her understand the importance of authenticity in her happiness and mental health. Okay, that was one way that SPPD could hypothetically manifest in someone, and perhaps disturbingly, it sounds like quite a few people I know. Now, let's look at a different case study to show the point of how differently the same hypothetical disorder could manifest. Liam is a 42-year-old IT consultant, and he epitomizes another facet of social pressure personality disorder, SPPD. Unlike Elena, who passively conforms to avoid disapproval, Liam's story is marked by an aggressive pursuit of social status and acceptance, which deeply influences his life decisions and his personal happiness. In his early life and background, he grew up in a competitive household where success was measured strictly by achievements. Liam learned early to value external validation over his personal satisfaction. His parents praised him only for winning and achieving top results, which instilled a deep-seated fear of failure or rejection. When it came to career and lifestyle choices, he was driven by the need to impress and be acknowledged. Liam chose a career in IT consulting not out of any passion for the technology, but because it was seen as a prestigious and lucrative field. He relentlessly pushes for promotions and accolades, often at the expense of his health and personal ethics. Despite his high income, and at least for some, his high status, Liam feels trapped in a career that he has little interest in. In terms of social dynamics and relationships, socially, Liam exhibits a pattern of manipulative behavior, often curating his friendships based on how beneficial they are for his image and career prospects. He hosts extravagant parties and participates in high-status activities. constantly updating his social media to project an image of success and belonging. His relationships are superficial, and he struggles with a persistent sense of loneliness and emptiness. When it comes to his personal life, Liam's romantic relationships are similarly strategic and fraught with insecurity. He dates people who elevate his status and often changes his behaviors, opinions, and even his appearance to match what he believes his partner desires. These relationships are unstable and marked by frequent conflicts due to his underlying insecurities and lack of genuine connection. His first turning point came about after a particularly tumultuous breakup, which led to him seeking some psychological help. In therapy, he began to confront just the exhausting nature of his life, a constant performance for the sake of others. CBT sessions did focus on identifying his intrinsic values and interests separate from societal expectations. He struggled more than Elena did in therapy due to his deeply ingrained habits of comparison and competition. However, mindfulness techniques and group therapy did gradually help him appreciate the importance of authenticity over approval. He manages to begin exploring some hobbies that genuinely interest him, such as photography, which he had previously avoided thinking about because they didn't seem very impressive. His path to recovery is long, bumpy, and full of setbacks, but he does experience some moments of genuine satisfaction and self-acceptance. And his story certainly highlights that the intense pressure of living a life defined by social expectations and the importantly rewarding but challenging journey towards self-discovery and authenticity is worth it. I shared both of these theoretical case studies an example of how a single disorder can show up so differently. Certainly, Elena and Liam seemed like two very, very completely opposite people almost. When we observe a single behavior in someone, we can be so quick to explain the reason behind it, yet it truly takes a very long time to understand someone. A good therapist might take several months of working with the client to confirm a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, for example. Yet, in life, I'll hear someone call someone else a narcissist after having one argument with them, and I really wanted to highlight the importance of being more open-minded when we look at others, or of course ourselves. And then, more generally, I do find the concept of social pressure fascinating because it is a problem that affects me and many people. When I spoke about the symptoms earlier, it seems like 90% of teenagers have half of them. And it's incredible how manipulated we can be by how we want to be perceived. And I thought it was cool to give two different examples of personalities and how they might have at least a few traits that you perhaps recognize in yourself. Of course, social pressure personality disorder is not a real disorder, but being easily swayed by social pressure is a weakness worth working on, and it might be coming from a lack of boundaries, too much ego, or a fundamental desire to just fit in. I would recommend the episode I did a few months ago on boundaries as a deep dive if any of that part is resonating with you. Now, how does this fit in with other disorders? It is a hypothetical disorder, but SPPD does share symptoms with several established personality and mental health disorders. Here are some disorders that could be easily confused with SPPD or could potentially contribute to its development. 1. Avoidant personality disorder. Both disorders involve a high level of anxiety about being criticized or rejected by others. Individuals with either disorder may avoid social situations or relationships due to fears of rejection or inadequacy. However, avoidant personality disorder focuses more on an avoidance due to feelings of personal inadequacy and sensitivity to rejection, whilst SPPD is characterized by excessive adaptation and conformity to avoid disapproval and ensure acceptance. Then we have dependent personality disorder. Both dependent personality disorder and SPPD involve a strong desire to please others, and combined with fears of separation or rejection. People with either condition might show a submissive or clinging behavior from a desire to feel more secure. However, dependent personality disorder is more about a need to be taken care of and a difficulty in making independent decisions, whereas SPPD centers on the need for social approval and fear of social disapproval. Then we have borderline personality disorder. Individuals with borderline often experience intense fears of abandonment, which can lead them to engage in behaviors similar to those seen in SPPD, such as rapidly shifting their opinions to match those of the people around them. However, borderline is characterized by a broader range of symptoms, including unstable relationships, self-image, as well as impulsive behaviors. The conformity drive in SPPD is more focused on social approval and less on the internal turmoil. Before I get into an endless list of different disorders, I'll just quickly summarize a few others. Social anxiety disorder, like SPPD, involves significant distress in social situations due to fears of negative evaluation by others. But social anxiety is really focused on just like the fear of embarrassment without a broad pattern of changing personal behaviors. Narcissistic personality disorder could be compared because both seek approval and admiration from others, similar to the pursuit of external validation seen from social pressure. But people with narcissistic personality disorder typically have an inflated self-image and lack empathy, which is different from the insecurity and high adaptability to other people's expectations, which is seen in SPPD. And then finally, generalized anxiety disorder. That involves pervasive and excessive worry that could cover a wide range of topics, of course, including social acceptance. But the worry in generalized anxiety disorder is much more diffuse and not specifically centered on only social approval or conformity, and involves many aspects of someone's life. So, if you were trying to diagnose SPPD in yourself or others, understanding the similarities and differences would be crucial for a clinician to accurately diagnose and treat individuals showing symptoms similar to the ones we've hypothesized for SPPD. And you really need to have an accurate diagnosis because that means you can give an appropriate treatment. And the treatment can vary significantly among different disorders, especially in the focus and methods of psychotherapy and medication management. And now, moving on to what should we do ourselves if we do have a problem with our social pressure. Whether we might want to call it a personality disorder or not is up to us, but we all have an inbuilt natural instinct to conform to social pressure. The important thing is having a healthy relationship with it and improving the behaviors that are negative. Someone with a growth mindset should be able to effectively manage and potentially reduce the challenges associated with trying to conform to social pressure too much. Firstly, they would embrace challenges and seek out situations that are mildly uncomfortable socially. Doing this would help gradually desensitize themselves to the fear of rejection or disapproval. And they'd be able to learn to view these experiences as opportunities to learn and grow rather than treating them as threats to avoid. Then with a growth mindset, you also persist in the face of setbacks, and you would continue engaging in social situations even after experiences of disapproval or rejection, because you would understand that these are parts of the learning process. With a growth mindset, you always remember that setbacks are normal and a necessary part of personal development, and there's no reason to retreat just because things go a bit wrong. And then when it comes to effort, we really embrace effort as a path to mastery. So when it comes to social pressure, we should practice our own self-expression and our own authenticity deliberately in various settings, such as with friends, family, or at work, to strengthen our own sense of self and our identity. And then there's a topic of criticism. We should learn to embrace criticism and respond positively to it. Reflect on any type of critical feedback objectively, distinguishing constructive insights from just harmful negativity. Ultimately, criticism is valuable information that can guide our own development, and we shouldn't let negative comments define our own self-worth. Then, how do we look at others? We should be inspired by successful people rather than jealous or envious. We shouldn't try to conform to the expectations of someone else's success or feel threatened by their achievements. We should just look at people who demonstrate authenticity and independence as role models, rather than wanting to replicate their exact identity. Just find people that really celebrate their own identity and try to do your own version of that. And that leads to the final task of developing a stronger sense of self. Building your own identity by engaging in activities and hobbies that interest you. And if you don't think you have any interests, just try a lot of different ones and see what sparks them. I'd never tried rollerblading before, but someone took me rollerblading. I liked it. Boom, I have a hobby. And take it on regardless of social approval. Just do it to build a more robust personal identity that is your own. With a growth mindset, you can always approach something and learn from it and get better. And as humans, we are prone to social pressure. And in fact, it's a good thing. It kept us alive when we lived in tribes. And it's still part of what teaches us what's right and wrong when we're young. Without social pressure, some people might think it's acceptable to have sex with kids, but no one does think it's acceptable because of social pressure is like, hey, you shouldn't do that. The problem is we feel social pressure for lots of things that actually don't matter. So we need to shift the focus from external validation when it's not needed to a more self-determined and a more authentic life for us. So there you have it, how to classify and treat your raging social pressure personality disorder and live a life of freedom on your own terms. Thanks for listening, and also thanks to Qin Liu, the author of The 3-Body Problem, for treating the concept of social pressure as an actual personality disorder. I did really enjoy putting this together, and I did actually scare myself a few times on the eerie amount of people I know that actually fall into some of the treatment criteria. So it did make me think that social pressure is more of a problem that we should take seriously. But then it also aligns, of course, with many things like ego and just understanding who you are and building your own identity. So I thought that was really cool. If you enjoyed the format, then let me know, as I might do a few more scientific deep dives into real disorders, or perhaps just some other afflictions that humans deal with, but how to think of them as if they were actual disorders to treat. If you do have any friends who you think might have social pressure personality disorder, and they need to start thinking more independently, do share this episode with them, because they'll obviously listen to it because they couldn't say no to you. And I can always handle more listeners. If you had fun at all, then do leave me a good review. That's nice. And remember that life is too short to be living it on other people's terms. So live your own life how you want to and stop worrying about other people. Just be kind to yourself and try to be kind to others as well when it suits.